TruthSeekah and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah Podcast.
Gargoyles, psychics, everything's ungodly. Dark savage.
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian.
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark savage stuff.
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is the TruthSeekah Podcast. I'm your host, TruthSeekah, and we got a good show planned for you guys today. Going to be talking about all things spiritual, as always. Got a great guest lined up for you guys. Can't go any further without saying thank you to all of the supporters, everybody who is sewing into this show and helping me create this thing on the back end. I couldn't do it without you guys, so thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart, everybody supporting my work via Patreon. Patreon's the perfect model to support independent artists and podcasts and anybody like that who's bringing something creative to the table. I mean, when it comes to music, the music industry's changed so much. Most people stream music or they try to download your music for free, and you don't really see that much money on the back end, especially trying to do this full time. So Patreon is the perfect model to support independent media. Thank you guys for doing that. If you'd like to give, you get access to my entire discography of music, which is like 10 plus albums. You get extra podcasts, bunch of cool stuff there. You also get access to our Thursday night private School of the Mystics, which is like the community aspect of what we're building here on the podcast. So just know that you're not alone. There's more people out there like you going through the same things, and yeah, there's community there. There is we kind of take away the excuse that I don't have nobody to talk to, or nobody knows what I'm going through, or I'm the only one. You're not. You're not the only one going through this stuff. You're not the only one dealing with these struggles and these thoughts. And, you know, you feel like you're peculiar. You're out there on an island by yourself. Trust me, there's a bunch of people who are going through what you're going through or have been through it before. So that's what the School of the Mystics is. And also our Discord channel as well. We hang out in there. And so if you would like to hang out with like-minded people, all that info is in the description as well. If you'd like to support, head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Get access to all that cool stuff. Want to thank some of the newest patrons that we have within the last week or so. Give a shout out to Angel Hernandez. Thank you for the support. Susie Lappner. Thank you, Susie. And Shawnee Benz. Thank you guys for coming on and joining the fold to support the work. You guys mean the world to me. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Huge shout out to some people giving at the diamond body level. We got Noah, Adam Brink, and Benny Ween and family. Thank you guys. Awesome. So, patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Head on over there, check out the work. And yeah, thanks for the support. Without further ado, we're going to bring in today's guest. We're going to be speaking with Ben Pierce from Come&Live. What's up, my brother? How are you?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey,
Excited
man.
to be a part of this.
Welcome to the podcast, man. I'm familiar with Come&Live. I've seen some of the stuff done with Brian Head Welch, Maddie Montgomery, For Today, Tom Green, some of those pieces that were put together years ago, man, and definitely have made an impact about being practical with the gospel, about sharing your faith and being practical with it. So yeah, I'm excited to have you on, man, to kind of dig into some of those concepts and your latest book as well, Jesus in a Secular World, which we were kind of talking about before we went live. It's kind of like my heartbeat here. Like, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, but I'm in, you know what I'm saying, the world. I deal with other topics that the church may find taboo or they don't want to address or whatever, but we kind of got to be a voice of reason in the midst of the culture, man. And so that's why I think it's important for, you know, for us to even discuss this about Jesus being in the secular world versus like, hey, once you come to church, let's bring everybody in the church. Like, the church is in the world. We don't need to go out. We need to bring them into the church or whatever, which has kind of been a weird form of evangelism, man. So we'll touch on some of those topics, but if you want to start off, man, just give a little bit of background about what you do and what you bring to the table, man. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm confusing on some levels. I was born in Amsterdam, in Holland. So I learned how to speak and write in Dutch before English. My parents were missionaries with something called YWAM, Youth with a Mission. I think people are pretty familiar with that. And so they started there. And you know what? The dominant social movement of the time were the punks and the anarchists, you know, these rebellious young people who had a negative idea of who God is. They saw church as this oppressive thing of the past. They would see these beautiful cathedrals that were just museums. You know, no one really took it seriously. And it was this dead, like I said, a dead tradition of the past. And so my parents were asking God, they were saying, how do we reach people who have such an intensely negative idea about who God is? You know, they're not coming to the church. They're not being reached in conventional ways. And so long story short, after a lot of prayer, my parents felt led to start a Bible study on a boat. So they had this boat that was right behind the central station in the center of the city. If you've been to Amsterdam, you've probably walked by where it used to be. And it was this big old red boat. And it was every week punks and crazy people and anarchists and all these sort of underground subcultural people were coming, and they were hearing about Jesus and they're giving their lives to him. Around the same time, my dad started a band called No Longer Music, which, as the name would suggest, the heart of it from the very beginning was to use music as a way to go to people, just like Jesus, to not expect them to come to us, but to go to their clubs, go to their festivals, and lift up the name of Jesus in a relevant way. And so this is really the history and the lineage that I come from. It is this sort of life of seeing God move outside of the church, trying to be relevant in the way we communicate, and then art and music being very much infused into that. And so to this day, I am a full-time missionary. I have a family. I have a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old daughter. So life has changed for me a bit in the last few months. But this is what I continue to do. I'm still No Longer Music. The band is still happening. I just got back from Ukraine, where we did a 8 shows in 10 days for around 19,000 people. This was part of a larger 5-month tour that went all throughout Europe. I was in Brazil in January. We're going to be in Colombia in December. And it's basically the same idea. How do we lift up Jesus, not in the church, but outside of the church, using relevant language, relevant symbols, it being clear, but spoken in a way that people really get it, you know, really being like Jesus. And so my life's work is really twofold. It's using art and music to tell people about Jesus, and it's challenging those inside the industry and inside the church community to do the same.
So with that being said, does the gospel become more practical versus getting someone to make a decision to follow Jesus? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I mean, if I understand you correctly, I think there's been a lot of backlash in maybe recent years to this sort of
like the model of it
right.
Yeah.
Maybe again, this isn't a critical statement at all, but maybe more the Billy Graham model of, you know, kind of you raise your hand and you write down those decisions and boom, it's easy, it's done. And it doesn't go any deeper than that. And I think the problem is we make things too binary. We make things we create these false dichotomies. Like, well, there's really intentional one-on-one evangelism that is deep and meaningful. And then there's sort of on the other end, then you have the sort of surfacey, cheap salvation of proclamation to a large setting. I think both, you see scripturally that both are relevant, right? Jesus would speak to the multitudes, but he would also speak to the individual. Salvation is never easy, right? The decision on some levels to receive what Jesus did for you on some levels is simple, but it's not easy, right? We then got to walk that out and choose to be obedient, and discipleship is messy, right? Sanctification is messy. So salvation should never be presented as this easy, God just wants to make you happy, God just wants to make your life better. No, it's complicated, and I talk to people after shows all the time, and I'm like, look, my message is not I'm better than you. My message is not I'm part of a cool club now where I have it all together. That is a lie. I'm in desperate need of Jesus today as much as I was the first time I heard about him. So we never present an easy gospel, but I don't think you can biblically argue that there's not a case for, man, if I'm in, like I was my last show in Ukraine, we were in front of about 4,500 people. I don't think you can make a case that I think, man, those 4,500 people left knowing that they're not accidents, knowing that Jesus cares about them, knowing that they've got this problem, they do bad things like we all do, and that only Jesus is hope. And so for me to not clearly present that from stage, because there's a risk that some people might receive that too superficially, I'm willing to take that risk while knowing that also I got to be down on the ground too and make people understand that it is an intense lifelong journey.
Does that look like the Billy Graham gospel message though from the stage? Like, here's the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Here's the gospel. He loves you. Is that what that looks like, or does it kind of come across in the music as well, and the art and presenting Jesus through the art and through a life laid down type deal? Or is it he loves you, and if you want to pray, or here's the gospel type deal?
We're very different. I don't know if there's probably anything like what we do. A big principle of ours is that you need to show people who Jesus is before telling them. And so part of that is, of course, there's a lifestyle component to that. But as artists, we don't get to live in front of the audience every day. They don't get to see us, right? So that's a little unrealistic. But what we do is we use theater and music and fire and video, and we combine this all into a very modern day depiction of the gospel story. Now, this is nothing like your Ben-Hur, this is nothing you're going to recognize at a church event.
The
Jesus story. It's using modern symbols. It's real, it's honest, it's pretty brutal even. But we do this because people are really suffering. People really are going through hard things. So we show the story of a guy and a girl are created, which makes sense in the whole creation story. But then the guy abuses the girl, and we use the shadow box to show this abuse scene, which is about as relevant today as it's ever been, right? But then the guy representing Jesus in our performance, he gives his life for the girl. He cries over her, because we show people in the audience, so many people think that if God does exist, he doesn't care. He's indifferent. He's far away. He's like, man, I don't care about what you're going through. And we want to prove that the opposite is true. And then ultimately, he dies and raises just like the gospel story. And we go for an hour. Our performance is about an hour. And it's not until the very, very end that we finally identify for the audience, hey, what you've seen is God. And it's amazing that after we give people a chance to see it, and then as we begin to share it, it's amazing the difference. You see people, it's almost like they go, man, I'm not supposed to like this religious stuff, but what you're presenting, what you're showing me, this I want.
Yeah.
And it's because people have such a negative idea of God. They have all of this baggage of abuse and power and hypocrisy. But I really think the real Jesus people want to know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Whenever you're able to just kind of use the things that are around people, I think Jesus did that. I think Paul did that using things that they can relate to. We see ministries here, which in times past I've been kind of critical myself, but there's a ministry that I actually helped with last year, but it's the House of Horrors ministry. It's a Christian haunted house, and so they give you this scary haunted house, get you scared. Then at the end, there were scenes where you walk through hell and people are in cages and fire, screaming, "I'm sorry, get me out of here, give me some water," those type of scenes, and then you see the gospel after you've kind of gone through there, and people have talked down about that, like you're trying to be like the world to win the world, and that's not how Jesus did it, type of deal. But it's effective. Like, they're presenting the gospel to people who are not going to come to your church. They're going thinking that they're going to a regular haunted house, but at the end they see the message of the gospel demonstrated in front of them. And so always when we start seeing that, it's always under a lot of scrutiny. Do you guys get any scrutiny from being kind of like that?
Yeah,
you do.
Well, of course.
With the symbols, and you guys are kind of complicating it, or God doesn't use the art. There's, God doesn't even use music, to share the gospel. It's not biblical, those type of things,
All the time, man. I've had so many stories of I've come off stage and my heart after a show is I want to talk to someone that doesn't know who Jesus is. That's where my heart is, and some group from the church will come up to me and be like, "Man, do you know that you played satanic riffs on your guitar?" I'm like, "Satanic riffs? What?" And another time we were just on a TV, like a YouTube channel in Ukraine, and the guy was, "What do you think about people who say that you can't use rock music to preach?" And I'm like, I don't know how people get so far away from Jesus. You know who also was criticized? Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, how do you read that? Yeah. He was an absolute affront to the culture of the day. The Jews hated him. He was breaking all the rules. He was speaking to the outcasts. He was speaking to women who are marginalized in that culture. He was breaking all the rules, right? So I think it's about having a real heart for people and then speaking the right language. And I think the problem is we add these things because it's really about control and power. I mean, that's what religion is. It's not about loving people. It's just modern day Pharisees. They didn't care about people. I mean, I think about the woman caught in adultery, right? These Pharisees didn't care about this woman at all. In fact, they were so harsh. Their only plan for her was to use her in a ploy to trap Jesus and then murder her. And you look at the way Jesus deals with her by contrast. Did she do a bad thing? Yeah, absolutely. Do we all do bad things? Absolutely. But the way he approaches her is with incredible mercy. And so I got to be honest, I have very little patience for modern day Pharisees that go out there and preach, man. Go do something with your life. Don't tell me that these, David talks about worship God with every loud cymbal and clanging drum. The fact that we get hung up on these morally neutral things, it's like, judge me by my fruit. Yeah. Right. Judge me by what God is actually doing. So yes, we deal with that quite a bit.
Are you familiar with kind of what NF is doing now? So NF he's I think he's under a lot of scrutiny. We can look at what he's done. We can look at Lecrae. I mean, these guys are examples. I mean, Lecrae went through some dark places. He's talked about from branching out and kind of doing what you guys seem to be doing, not watering the message down, but he's already got 10 albums about the gospel and biblical teachings. And now he's kind of relating it in more of a place where it's practical and people can understand it, that you don't have to know that you're listening to a Christian rap album type deal. He's stepping out, and Christian hip hop, a lot of people in the churches have just like kind of, went to the blogs and kind of turned their back on him and stuff like that. And to really put a bad taste in his mouth now about Christian music, and not wanting to be a part of it, things like that. There was a pretty big Christian hip hop artist just put out some article on Facebook, and it's been like on a tangent about NF performing for 15,000 people and not sharing the gospel. And you read the comments and everybody's, blah, 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 and they're just tearing into him. So is he justified with the art speaking for itself with, what he's doing? Like, what I'm saying, my art, and I went through the struggle. I was on pills. I was from abusive families, but I, found hope in God, and the gospel's in there. You may have to kind of sift through it a little bit, but it's in there. Are they justified in that? Would you scrutinize the way that they're doing it, or what?
Man, I think the first thing, I think this conversation gets complicated because we create these straw man arguments, and we create these false dichotomies. And so on one end you have the Christian artist who preaches, but they got terrible music and they don't care about art, and they just shove it down people's throats, and
but they just get the point across.
But they get their point across.
Yeah.
But they're these Bible machines, and they just bash people on the head with the Bible. And then on the other hand, you have the artist who blatantly refuses to say anything, and they're all strung out, and they've got all this secret sin in their lives, and so we create these really narrow categories on either end. The first thing I would say is this is not a salvation issue. I don't think you're saved by what you do. And so I don't think that what I mean by salvation issue is for NF. I think some people go, oh, how could you be a Christian? Or I think that's horrible. It's not for us to judge that. And also, God doesn't love us because of what we do. So this is not a value issue either. Like, I am not more or less valuable because I preach or don't preach. Right? God loves me because of who I am as his son, and because he created me and died for me. That's what makes me valuable. So with those disclaimers that I don't think this is a salvation issue for someone, that this makes them saved or not, or valued. For me, I think it boils down to what would Jesus do, right? I mean, the cheesy bracelets, right? That what ultimately, isn't that what we should be about as authentic followers of Jesus? What would he have us do? And I haven't performed for 15,000 people, but like I said, I was just on a stage in front of more than 4,000 people. And for me, it's like, I think about Jesus's heart, right? And he looks out, and it says in scripture that he looked out over the multitudes and had compassion because they were sheep without a shepherd, right? And to me, the world is on fire. People are being abused. People are being lied to. Secular humanism is making people believe that they're accidents, that the best they can do is accumulate things and grow old and die, and they're being destroyed. People are being destroyed by the lies of the world. And if I looked out over a crowd I don't want to judge him, and that's for God to do. But if I looked out over the crowd of 15,000 people with all the hurt and all the brokenness and all the destruction, and I knew that what they really needed, do they need to get off drugs? Sure. Do they need to clean their lives up? Sure. But Jesus is not just about cleaning up your life. That's a lot of things can clean up your life. Jesus is about being forgiven, right? Jesus is about being redeemed. And if I'm looking out over that crowd and I have the answer, if I really believe I have the answer, I could not say something.
Yeah.
I'd have to say something. And it's not about not doing it in a good way, right? It's not about, you're all going to hell and repent. It's not about that. It's compassion, and it's understanding your audience, and it's communicating clearly. And not every song has to be John 3:16 for an hour and a half bashing people. But would I go that whole hour and a half and leave people with just, this is my struggle, and drugs are bad, and anxiety is bad, and as relevant as those topics are and as important as those topics are, I don't think I could leave out the most important message in all of history.
What about, and I don't know how much of it, I guess it is, but what about if, like, the excuse for him not to say something would be, or even me, not to say something would be the fact that, I mean, you would say something, right? If you're just going to be out there being open and honest with people, I think that's going to come up somewhat. But what about the answer being in the music? Like, here's the art, listen to the stories, listen to the struggle. It's in the art type deal. Like, I don't have to do the altar call, or I don't have to, I remember going to Christian concerts back in the day, and the venues would say, hey, you guys can't preach at our venue. And then at the end they say, hey, we want to let you know. Even, I know you did some stuff with Spencer or whatever, but I seen Under Oath back in the day go into like a vegan atheist venue back in 2002, when it wasn't popular, and the rules were you can't mention Jesus, you can't preach, and right before their last song, hey, Jesus loves you, and that's it. But this was before Spencer, right? And they would just do little stuff like that, like, hey, check out the music, check out our work, and then there you're gonna get the gospel from that,
Yeah. Again, I think it comes down to being honest with your heart and motivation. Do I think there are unique situations where you need to respect the club owner? We've been in contexts where the club owners very respectfully said, look, these are paying customers. I really would appreciate if you didn't do an altar call or anything like that. And we respect that. We're We're not just going to run people over. And, the good thing about having the gospel built into your show like ours is that people come away seeing the gospel for sure, if not hearing it. To me, it's about your heart, man. It's like, okay, honestly examine your heart as to why you're not wanting to speak. Is it because you really care about people? Or is it because you're worried about losing your platform? Is it because you're worried about looking foolish? Are you worried about not fitting in to the culture around you? The gospel is countercultural. It's not commercial. The gospel is going to cost you something. I mean, how is it that we can read the Bible where all of our heroes were killed for their faith? And then we can think 2,000 years later that what Jesus would want for us is to just not rock the boat, fit in, and just kind of sprinkle in a message. Why would that model be laid out for us? That, man, these guys loved people, but it cost them. It cost them their lives because they were speaking the truth, and the gospel is always going to cost you something. And I think if again, I'm not going to judge somebody's heart. Yeah. That's not what my job is. But what I would say is ask honestly what it would mean to follow Jesus' example. And honestly, look at your heart and say, why am I not speaking the most important thing? If I got the cure for cancer, why am I giving someone ibuprofen instead?
Yeah, man. Who are some of these heroes now who are out there doing it? I know you guys have a lot of people you guys work with. We actually have Mark Moore on here from Christafari. He was on the podcast. Maddie Montgomery, like hands down, like I would watch footage just to get to the place of him preaching, you know what I'm saying, in his live concerts and like secular bars and secular clubs and tours or whatever, and giving a clear message, a radical message of the cross. Maddie Montgomery, Tom Green from Sleeping Giant. Again, those are the two people that my mind goes straight to. Who are some of the heroes out there now who you can applaud, who are actually, they don't care about their lives anymore. It really is about the gospel, and they're doing it in a secular crowd or whatever, versus just at churches,
Yeah. Honestly, it's rare. It's very, very rare.
Those are the two that kind of stand out, man. I probably
seriously,
named them.
You kind of stole all my thunder. You called them all out for me. No, there are. I mean, there's a lot probably that aren't. I don't think it's coincidental that the ones are out there that are doing it don't get we don't know them, and there's a reason for that. That's part of it. Honestly, is that our culture doesn't celebrate the gospel, and so it's not surprising that it's not widely known, those that are preaching. I mean, there are people within our world. We work with a Russian speaking band named Nuteki. They're really big in the Russian speaking world. And they, they've been part of our ministry now for several years, and God is using them. I mean, they're going to all these Russian speaking worlds, like countries like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and Belarus, where you cannot preach, where the government forbids you to preach. And they're being bold. They're risking their livelihoods, their reputations. We have a Brazilian band named Allegorica that's doing the same thing. They're kind of in the goth underground club scene, and they're going to some heavy hardcore places, being open with the gospel. And honestly, that's another thing. Real quick, speaking to that Russian speaking band, where now they live in a time and in a country where they cannot preach. I was in Russia. And Russia was open for many, many years after the fall of the Soviet Union. And now it's closed. Now the government literally forbids you from preaching on the streets. You cannot preach. And we were talking to pastors, and they were looking at us emotional, saying, we thought we'd have forever. We thought we'd be able to preach forever. And we did not take advantage of the time we had. And now the doors are closed. Yeah. And I think about that in our own context. We take it for granted in the US as artists that we can speak our minds. It may not be like that forever. The days of being able to say what we believe, that door might be closing.
It's changing quick.
It is. And I'm saying, man, that's part of it, is urgency factors in to what you're willing to risk if the message matters enough to you. Yeah.
Man, I remember years ago being in the church and always hearing about this coming persecution that was going to come. And they said that, it would bring forth revival whenever the persecution came. And it was always just this coming persecution to the church or whatever. I kind of think that it's here, man. I think that, the message is being, it's not popular anymore. Like it used to hey, you're a Christian, me too. And, blah, 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 blah. Now, if you admit that you're a Christian on social media, for one, you're going to get your post and your page throttled. Nobody's going to be able to see your post if you're sharing it like that. But, in in the secular realm, and maybe it was like this, back in the day, but you were laughed at, you were scoffed at, you were ridiculed for being a Christian, in the age of reason, in the age that we're in now of psychology and stuff like that,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we always, the phrase that I tend to find myself using is there used to be a social benefit to believing in Jesus in this country. You'd meet your spouse at your church. You would find your business partners at church. You were seen as an upstanding citizen for going to church. Now there's a social cost.
You're crazy.
you got it. And so that's why, again, I don't think it's a coincidence that artists are going underground, because back in the, even now, I think guys like Keith Green and Larry Norman were radical even then, but it was a different time. And there was the Jesus movement and all that. Now, man, you got to really be prepared to fight. You got to be countercultural, and you're going to come under a lot of opposition to preach. It's because now to be a Christian is you're anti-scientific, you're homophobic, you're a bigot, you're closed-minded, you don't think.
Transphobic, yeah.
Exactly, and all that. And of course, we don't agree with that, but that's what you get labeled, and it's hard to emerge, especially as an artist, under that label.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the persecution's there to kind of weed out the people who aren't really serious or whatever. Like, if you're gonna stand up, like, you really have to stand up. You can't be like, I believe in God too, like, really, your lifestyle says otherwise. So if we look at people who are successful at being Christians, or successful at being preachers, or they make it look cool, maybe, if that's a thing, right? It's someone who's sold out. We look at those two names I mentioned. We look at Todd White, someone like that, who's like, people are, I'm saying, just drawn to him because it's no teeter-totter. This is what you get. You need it. You're sick. You need Jesus. I got him for you. Let's get it in. And he's unashamed to go out in public and just start singing praises and worships and walking up to random people and leading them to Christ or whatever. So it is like this line that say, okay, as far as like the lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth type deal. Like, if you're lukewarm, everybody knows it. But if you love Jesus, you really love Jesus, right?
Right. And part of that is, again, as I mentioned, we create straw man arguments to distance ourselves from that end of the spectrum. So it's like, for some reason, to be open, is to be unloving or irrelevant or harsh or all these things. And so, I don't want to be any of that, as if it's those things are connected when they're not. Like, it's not mutually exclusive for me to be clear with the gospel and still know how to talk to people outside of the church. It's not mutually exclusive for me to believe the Bible is real and it says what it says, and still love people and still care about people and still show mercy. And so I think what happens is we create these, straw men, right? We create these monsters out of the side we don't really want, because they're deep down, there's a pride thing. And so if I can distance myself from preaching the gospel because to preach the gospel means X, Y, and Z when it doesn't, then it's easier for me to justify in my head, I don't want to be that, because, I want to be a loving, relevant artist. And so of course that means I can't preach the gospel, which to me, Jesus was incredibly loving, incredibly relevant, but didn't hide what he was about. Why can't it be the same for us?
Talking about the straw man, we look at people like, I guess Todd White's a great example. I would call him a hero, a hero, a champion of the faith right now, man, doing a great work. Yeah. But then again, it's kind of like the straw man is like, to be radical, you have to be that. And that's kind of a lie too, right? Like, I can't be whatever God's called you to, whatever area, and not be as vocal. We kind of look like, being a good Christian or being a successful, or what God wants you to do is be another Todd White type deal, right? That's there. People watch those videos like, man, I'm not as outgoing as Todd White. You know what I'm saying? So they judge themselves among themselves, and that's not it either, right?
No. Of course, it's about being who God's created you to be. Now, there's going to be a narrow road. There's going to be a cost, whatever it is. I was recently reading about how in the early church, the early apostles, they were saying, man, we need to find some people that can wait on the tables. It kind of seemed like a patronizing way to say it, but we can't deal with all this, stuff. We got to be praying and preaching, and we got to find some other people to do this other stuff. And what I find very interesting is that Stephen is one of those guys that apparently was supposed to just be waiting on the table. The next thing we hear about Stephen, he's out preaching and preaching with such clarity and such power that he ends up getting stoned. He ends up getting killed. And so to me, it's like, man, it doesn't matter what God has called you to. It's not about being someone you're not. It's not about saying, I need to be the next Billy Graham. It's about saying, God, first of all, it's got to be birthed out of a real relationship, right? I don't do things for God because I earn his love that way, or because it's my moral duty, or other Christians are going to shame me if I don't. If you look at Isaiah 6, what happened first? First, he had a revelation of God's holiness, right? He said he saw the angel, right? And then when he saw how amazing God was, what did it do? It made him see how sinful he was. God, you are so amazing. I'm a man of unclean lips.
Yeah.
And he puts the coal on his lips. Then he says, what? Here am I, send me. It didn't like, oh God, I feel guilty, or, oh God, I see all these examples. I probably should be like them. Here am I, send me. No, he had a revelation of how powerful and amazing God is. He had a revelation of how desperately dependent he was. And out of that place of brokenness, he said, God, whatever you want, do it. Whoever you made me to be, I'll be that. I don't care if I'm anything. I don't care if I'm nothing. Just use me. And then God began to use his life. And I think it works the same for us.
Talking about the straw man again, or this fake, this picture of what a Christian looks like, or what evangelist looks like, or a pastor, whatever. You mentioned YWAM. I don't know how tied to that organization you are, or ones that are close to it. I've got some friends here who have been to YWAM. Also, coming up as a young Christian myself, there was the Master's Commission, which was kind of the same thing, like a live-in program. We train you up, disciple you, send you out, all of this kind of stuff, and you live there. And it looked really good. I was hungry for God. I wasn't a part of it, didn't have the money at the time. Right. But I seen it. I was like, man, these guys are praying night and day. They wake up, like their job is to pray, to get up, to read the word, to fast, and to go out and help people, evangelize, go to travel to churches, tell their story. And as a young Christian, it looked really good. Like I wanted to do it or whatever. And I seen that. And then I had friends at the time who was like, they're like, nah, man, Master's Commission kind of messes people up. I've had friends that went and it kind of messed them up. I'm like, no way, bro. They get like, it's all God. Like it's all ministry. You live, eat, breathe, sleep ministry, right? I mean, it sounds like a no brainer. But then a couple years later, I had some friends I was in a band with. They came out of Master's Commission, this type of Christian bubble that was created for them. And there's this whole time we're doing ministry, we're winning the lost. And it's like, okay, we're sending you out so that when you graduate from the program, like every single one of them thought they were going to be a missionary, they were going to be a pastor, a youth pastor, apostle, whatever it is. They thought they were going out to do ministry, and then they went out and they got married, and then bills hit them in the face and they had to get a job, and they were overwhelmed. They didn't know how to respond to real life or whatever. So I could see how my friends were talking about, these programs messed them up. Like I seen my friends go through it. It was sad, bro. It was really sad because they didn't know how to do life. They knew how to do ministry, but they didn't know how to do life. They didn't know that the dude wasn't, the leaders wasn't saying you're going to go out and get a job. You're going to be bagging groceries for 2 years and, you're going to have a kid. Like they didn't prepare them for that stuff. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, this has been my life. I mean, I'm a full-time missionary. I've supported I've been married for almost 8 years and I have 2 kids, and by God's grace, we're still, we have a house and we're doing good and we're living. And, I don't want to necessarily criticize another missions organization. I think that everyone, we're doing our best, and we're doing our best to prepare. I think that, it's typical when you're young to not know about life, right? I mean, that's missions or not. People have idealistic ideas of what they're going to do, and then life comes, and it's tough. It's tough a lot of dreams die once bills hit. You know what I'm saying? A lot of artists find that out the hard way, right? Yeah. So it's definitely tough, and that's a training issue. I think it's a discipleship issue. You look at Paul, man, he made tents and he did missions. I worked part-time. I worked full-time and did missions. Then I was part-time and I did missions. And I have friends, the guitarist in our band, probably one of the most talented guitarists I've ever met. He can play anything that has a note attached to it. Yeah. But he's been working at a grocery store for the last several years to support his side thing. It's about saying, God, I'll do whatever it takes, and I trust you. But it's also, it also says in the Bible that if you don't provide for your family, you're worse than a sinner.
Yeah.
So I made a commitment, for example, to my wife. I said, look, one of two things is going to happen. Either God's going to provide through this missions thing, or I'm getting a job. That's going to, I guarantee you one of those two things.
One or the other,
right?
Yeah.
I know, but it sounds funny. It sounds like duh. But a lot of people say, I'm doing this missions thing, and then they don't see God provide, and then their families suffer. Well, I was never going to let that happen. Yeah. So I think if God, it's going to be tough, like anything. If you want to pursue an acting career or a music career, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to sleep on your couch sometimes. Yeah. But in the missions world and in the following God world, I think if it's supposed to happen, you will see evidence. God will start. Maybe it's going to be rough, but each step along the way, God will continue to show you that he's faithful, that he's good. And I would say to people that are struggling, consider the possibility that maybe God would call you in a different way. Maybe you should get a job and be Jesus in your workplace.
Exactly.
But the option is not to not provide.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I would see people, and this kind of shook me back in the day for some reason. But like I knew youth pastors that were a lot older than me, youth pastors, and even pastors as well. Something would happen. They get to make a living. They get a paycheck. They get salary to preach and teach the gospel. And for a lot of Christians, like that's the thing to do, is to be able to find some type of situation, whether you're a missionary, whether you're a youth pastor, but somewhere where you can wake up, preach the gospel, get a paycheck or be provided for or whatever, but to be able to do it full time, like that's the goal for a lot of Christians. It's sexy, it's enticing. I mean, and I would see people who were doing that, and then they would lose their job as being the youth pastor, and then they would go get the job at as being a bank teller, and there was no more gospel in their life. Like They did it as long as there was a paycheck, versus the people that I knew and sects that I've been involved with that were like, we're going downtown Friday night, we're preaching from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And we're not, we're like the nobodies or whatever the case is. Like we eat, sleep, and breathe gospel, versus the pastors who were let go or they had to get a regular job, so they don't even like have a hunger for ministry or whatever. I don't know. Maybe they were hurt, from being let go. I'm not sure, but
yeah. I think if we're not careful, if you've been a believer for 5 minutes, you will very quickly be tempted to become professional at it. You become just, the language, how to do it. And, and I think that's not what it's about.
There's a lot of them out there too, man. That's the bad thing, right?
There is, but I look at myself first and I say, Jesus, don't let that happen to me. It's think about, like, I don't know if you're married or not, but sorry. Yeah. But like a marriage, your relationship with your wife can become very mechanical if you're not careful, and it's no longer love. It's just sort of a thing you're doing. You're functioning roommates, and you learn how to pay the bills together and maybe even raise a family together, but there's not a dynamic, intimate, personal relationship there. That's something that has to be cultivated and worked on and developed. And that's the place that you then do things for God. I think so many people make the mistake that they think being a Christian is about the things you do. I'm defined by what I do. So I go to church. We're good at knowing that it's not like very ritualistic, so it's not about saying certain words. We're not, like Catholics or something like that, but we still do that. We still make it religious. We still X, Y, and Z has to be accomplished for me to be a Christian. Yeah. When I think it's an inside out process. We are in love with Jesus. He permeates our life. It spills over. And so it doesn't matter. You could put me in an island. I'd preach to the trees. It's just it's in me. It's the most exciting. It's like, I got this friend I got to introduce you to. He's awesome. I talk to him all the time, as opposed to, I'm not going to introduce you to someone that I barely know that I've heard about. Yeah. And I sometimes attend a weekly meeting about him. It's not going to work.
I think it has something to do with authenticity. And it's just something that's kind of, I've been, coming to terms with over the last year now, of being able to see people being authentic with everything, with their flaws, with their shortcomings, with what they like or whatever the case is, and being okay with that. Not saying that they're okay in their sin, but they're, you know what I'm saying, that they're not perfect, or they have other hobbies outside of preaching the gospel that make them a regular person or something like that, or they like to have a drink or whatever the case is. Everybody's different, but in like church culture, it's like you have to conform to the other people around you. And I guess a perfect example would be going to church on Sunday morning, and that you're being greeted when you come in the door. Hey brother, how are you? How's the Lord? What's the Lord doing in your life? And how are you? And you kind of learn the phrases. Hey, I'm blessed and highly favored, man. I'm the head and not the tail. Like that was the type of culture we were in church and stuff. But versus like coming into the church, like, man, I don't even know if I believe anymore. Like, been up drinking all night. I need God in my life. Like, you can't really be open and authentic because you're going to be judged by these people. But being authentic, man, in whatever that looks like, whatever it is like taking the mask off, which is the role of the hypocrite, taking that off and quit acting like, sure, I'm this guy or I'm the believer. Man, I have questions. I believe in things biblically that you don't. I believe in things that if I'm open about what I believe in is going to get me kicked out of your church, all of these things. But when I started being authentic, because I seen other people doing it and they were free, man. Like they were, God still loved them because they didn't fit the cookie cutter mold, or their theology was jacked up, or whatever the case is, and being okay with that, man. There was a freedom that came with that. Do you think what we're talking about has to deal with authenticity?
Yeah, absolutely. But I what I will say is that I do think that God has, I think we need to be careful, because the spirit of our age is relativism. The spirit of our age is the postmodern deconstruction of any truth that I can believe whatever I want. Again, it's similar to our conversation about rock and roll. It's like, what? Jesus never had a problem with a style of music or a date. You've got to look a certain way, or you've got to, of course, there's that element of it, not adding things to God that he never added to himself. There's also an element of not being someone we're not. Like Jesus, the fact that God died for me, knowing that I would continue to sin, that I should hate sin. I should not want it. But I will. I'm gonna keep sinning, and Jesus still loved me and died for me, knowing that I would continue to be rebellious all the days of my life. I mean, before that kind of God, I should just be who I am. But for me, the whole issue of sanctification, of becoming like Jesus, I kind of look at it like Jesus has a great plan for me, for everything, for every part of my life. It's like he designed the car, right? And I'm the driver of the car, but he knows every part of it, how it should work, how it shouldn't work. And we kind of view sin, even as Christians, as like God trying to inhibit our freedom. To me, God designed me. So when he says put gas in the car, not coffee, that's because that's how it's going to run. That's how it's going to be free and alive. And so when you say freedom, I say freedom is found in living how Jesus calls me to live.
Yeah, I'm not going against that. Well, unless that's what it looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like, would you rather the sinner, we hear it in church all the time, I'd rather you just be open with your sin and not hide it, or whatever the case is, versus you coming in the church and hiding your sin and blah, 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 all of this kind of stuff. I think it kind of hinges on that, as like, if you're trying to be someone that you're not, Jesus has done the work. And I'm not talking about really sin issues. When I make the example, I probably am talking more about theology type stuff, and if I'm mentioning theology, the perfect example, like you just said, the rock and roll or the gospel rap, you're trying to use rap to win the world. You're trying to be like the world to win the world. I'm in the Bible Belt, man. Like, there's a church on every corner, and they all have the absolute truth, and the other one's wrong or off on some things. That's really weird to even have the audacity to think that. But it's there. But to be okay to be different, to be okay, and not act like you have it all together, or act like you know everything, right? That's a big thing in the churches, man. Like, I've seen, like, we have to act like we have it all figured out, and we have to have an answer for everything, because if you don't, then the people will go looking for the person who does. People, because people are looking for truth. People are looking for it, but to pretend like we have it all figured out and we like this is the final say so, the final doctrine on a biblical issue that's kind of just even up in the air, and all those other churches believe different things about that same thing.
Right.
And just to be okay with that, because there's just like this weird contention there. I mean, I know you've been in church culture, you know it. Like just like you mentioned, I'm not like the Catholics type deal, like that type of deal. You know, everybody feels like they have it. You know, everybody needs to be one to our theology. Or have you been there with other? It's different with the world. It's different with the gospel versus the Christians kind of going.
Well, I think that the problem is, again, it's similar to what I said, that if we don't define any truth, if we don't accept that there's anything we can agree on, then we're in a hopeless infinite regress of postmodernism, and there's nothing. Then we might as well just scrap the whole thing, and we can all just kind of go about our business. So I think there are essentials. And again, I said the Catholic thing only in the sense that I meant that people associate Catholicism with the highly ritualistic view. And I know some Jesus-loving Catholics that put me to shame in their devotion to God. So that's not that. I didn't want for that to be heard in the wrong way. But what I mean is that there are essentials. And I think we need to wrestle with what those are. I think there are some critical non-negotiables. And then, man, there needs to be some serious grace with the rest of it, honestly. And for me, there's a lot of things I can get mad about. There's a lot of political issues I can get mad about. There's a lot of peripheral theological issues that I can get mad about. But honestly, when I read Paul, I just got this, when you read him, there's just this singular devotion to the most important thing. I profess to preach nothing but Christ and him crucified. I consider all else trash compared to this. Right. So there was this singular devotion. It's kind of like, man, life is short. It's almost like he knew, it's almost like someone whispered in his ear how little time he'd have. Big time. Because he just made his life and everything else was expendable. It's like, man, we're going to go after it. If this is, I just read about how he has Timothy circumcised as an adult because that's going to make it easier for them to preach to the Jews. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Timothy in that exchange. I can't even imagine that. But it's like he was so devoted to the basic idea that Jesus is the way, the only way, that we are not saved by anything but by grace, right? These critical core things I think we do have to come to an agreement about, man, and then everything else. My thing is, why are we wasting our time, honestly?
Even that with like you just saying that, like I feel like you're being authentic versus someone who's just repeating because they know how to go through the motions. They've seen you evangelize and let me do it or whatever the case is. When someone's sharing that truth that you just shared authentically, like that's where the power comes in, because you really believe it and you really have experienced it or whatever. And you can't give any listener, anybody, anything that you don't tangibly have. And I think it all comes out of your relationship with God. Like it's like genuine, you know what I'm saying? And so being authentic with that. And I have people who like their, their dreams are to be a famous rapper. Their dream is to own their own carpentry business or whatever. And I have other friends who their dream is to be a preacher, a full-time preacher and win their city to Christ. Like that's their hunger and their goal. And it's authentically going to come out of them. Like it's their heartbeat, man, what they're passionate about. And and it's not, I don't think the carpenter's wrong. I don't think that the rapper's wrong, right? If they're pursuing it, obviously we all need Jesus, right? We all need love. We all need grace, and we need the gospel. But there's this thing, like for people who aren't doing it like you or doing it like me, it's like, hey, this is the way it's done. Even just sharing the gospel, and we're talking about music, and again, coming from the Bible, we've heard it all. Like you can't use this, you can't use that, you can't. And I'm like, kind of like going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, like not debating. It's like, look, you want to bet? You can't use rap to preach the gospel. You want to bet? So you have the people who are not doing it telling the people who are doing it how to do it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
It's about control. That's what religion is. We've had Pharisees from the very beginning. We'll have Pharisees till the very end. It's because for them, it's about a club that they can determine based on certain parameters who's in and who's out, right? And so the reason why they have to get away from the gospel is because the gospel is the most inclusive thing in the world. People say it's exclusive. It's not. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be poor. No matter what you look like. It doesn't matter if you're educated or not educated. Anyone can come and fall before the feet of Jesus and say, I need you, save me. There's no one. It's exclusive in the sense that it's the path, it's the right and only path, but it's inclusive in the sense that you don't need to do anything. You don't need to add anything. You just need to come as you are and admit where you're at, and Jesus will reach out and grab you. Beyond that, for me, I think ultimately my heart is, look, if your sincere desire is to know Jesus, to read your word, to read God's word, to look at the life of Jesus and say, how did he live? How can I live like him? If that's your sincere desire, then I firmly believe that that's going to manifest in whatever calling you have. So if you're the carpenter, then man, you're going to be the carpenter that's going to be bugging all your carpenter buddies and telling them about the most amazing carpenter, right? But I mean, you hear stories about that all the time, man, that guys that were but there are also the guys that are there for you when you're down. There are also the guys that are slipping you a check when you're down and out. You hear stories of, I think we're going to get to heaven. We're going to be amazed by who the heroes are. We're going to think they're the cool visible guys that are on podcasts, but really they're going to be the invisible guys that were serving and loving and being Jesus to no audience whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's that's what it's about. Be authentic, want to love and follow Jesus. And man, I kind of feel like the rest of this stuff's going to figure itself out.
Yeah, I do too, man. We're talking about, your book, Jesus in the Secular World. I think most of these topics are kind of what we've touched on is kind of it's
kind of comes out of me. I can't help it.
I think we're still on topic, really. I was sent a chapter, and there was an emphasis towards the end of the chapter on prayer and how prayer is so important in individual's life with all of this stuff we're talking about, right? No matter who you are, which person you are, and these people we were talking about, but prayer is essential for each and every one of us. We're like, what's the big thing for you with prayer, man? And why is it so important?
I think for me that, prayer, I mean, what constitutes a relationship? Talking and listening, right? And so prayer is half that battle. If you aren't talking to God, you're not in relationship with him. So I think for starters, it's about that, having that relationship with God. I think also it relates to understanding as a Christian where the power comes from. I think so often in the Christian world, we kind of address issues in our own lives or the lives of others or the world in very practical ways, kind of like business world does. What's the strategy? What's the plan? Okay, let's lay it out. How are we going to deal with this issue? Let's get together and let's brainstorm the next thing. And what I've seen, the evidence I've seen in my life is that when God changes things, it's because of his power, not because of our actions. God changes things when he moves. I mean, Paul even talks about it. He says, men are not convinced by human wisdom, but by God's power. And here's a guy who is brilliant. I mean, he could argue anyone out of their position. He knew your stuff better than you did. Yeah. But he says, look, none of that's going to matter. If God doesn't show up, he's not, then they're not going to be changed. I've played hundreds and hundreds of shows. I've seen thousands of people radically changed. But I know it's not because the music was so great or I used the perfect combination of words when presenting the gospel. No, it's because God chose to inhabit what we did and reveal himself in a powerful way. And it says in Hebrews 11:6 that God rewards those who seek him with an earnest heart. That if we would seek him, he will reward us. And I believe the reward is his power moving in us and through us. And that's why prayer for me is so non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of pulls you out of the monotony, or like you're talking about religion, like the religious thing without the Holy Spirit. It is disgusting, man. It is so nasty, and I refuse to be a part of religion without the presence of Jesus, right?
Of course.
Like,
Of course.
I can't do it. I won't do it. It gets crazy, man. So that's what it is. Just talking about like the relationship. You're talking about having a relationship with your spouse or whatever. Like, you kind of know each other intimately. You have a schedule, right? You know it's time to cook dinner. You know it's time to get the kids ready, blah, 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 all of this kind of stuff. But there's something about just being open, being authentic, even with that spouse, letting them know that you care about them and your fears, everything, right? And just having that relationship. And it's the same way with the Father. It's the same way with Christ. It's like being in that intimate relationship. And I think we're called the bride of Christ for a reason. I really do think it mirrors that example of the marriage.
Yeah. And again, I mean, for me, I'm a very kind of a restless, active, maybe overly ambitious person. And so my trap is to start to believe that what I do defines who I am.
Yeah.
And man, the simple act of just, going on to some park and just seeking the Lord, it goes against every quote unquote productive bone in my body. I'm like, I could be doing this. I got to be writing. I got to be, and yet to just still all of that and to say, no, this is who I am. This is what I need. This is what satisfies me. And in Western thinking, we're way too transactional with the way prayer works. We view prayer like I give to God something and then he gives something back to me, right? It's very transactional. But imagine if you treated your wife that way. It's like, well, I talk to my wife because I either need to give something for her or she needs to give something to me. That's why we talk. That wouldn't be very deep, right? Sometimes you just talk. It's about just being together. It's about that intimacy of just hanging out. Like, this is my dad. This is who I'm this is who I am as a person. This is how I truly satisfy the longings of my heart. And I don't find that in anything. Ultimately, everything I do, even the Christian things I do, don't really give me life like my just personal walk with God. That's everything. That's the foundation. That's why I can even love my wife the way I should. That's why I can love my kids the way I should. That's why I can even reach anybody, is because first, I am a son of God. He loves me. Man, I get to be with him. He speaks to me. Like, what the heck? The creator of the universe actually knows and speaks to me. Yeah. He's real and powerful. And man, I say to myself every day, let my measure of success be that I am more like Jesus at the end of this day than I was before. That's it. My prayer is that if someone would meet me after having not seen me for a year, they wouldn't say, man, I saw, you did all those songs and those podcasts and you wrote all this. I would want them to say, man, you're different. Like you are, again, I'm not saying that to stroke my ego, but I would love for them to say, man, you seem more like Jesus than you did a year ago. You love, peace, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. You're more of all that. Man, that's cool. And that's for me a measure of success.
I'm with you on that. I think that's the only thing that like I judge people off of, especially the people who come with the book or come with the religion or come with the great ideas on how to do it. I try to judge their fruit. And you know what I'm saying? My life changed when I started doing that. I started having more peace in my life and I think it's the way Jesus told us how to judge as well. Judge no man before his appointed time, or judge nothing before its appointed time, and to judge people by their fruit. The fruit can't lie. Like, it's gonna come out. So I judge all people by that, man. And I like to go where the fruit is. I like to be around people who bear fruit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And you can't lie. Eventually it's going to come out. It may take a few weeks, may take a little while, but if you hang around somebody long enough, that fruit's going to come out of what they really believe,
Yep. Yeah, no. And for me, like, there's nothing greater for me than, after a show just a few weeks ago, these couple of girls came out to me and they were both in tears and they said, all my life, all I've ever been told is that I got to earn God's love, that I felt that he's far away, that I'm never going to be enough. Man, thank you so much for coming and telling me that Jesus is my dad, that he loves me, that I can know him. People can say what they want about me, but that is it. That's what I know God has put me here to do. And we could spend the next 10 hours with me giving you stories of how God has moved in that way. Not because I'm good, not because I'm perfect, but because God uses people that just
it's being effective, man. Like that's the fruit, dude. That's the point. And it's the people who hopefully, most likely, they're not going to step a foot in the church like that. The church is good at that model, whatever you're called to. But I really do think it's time to be radical. I do think it's time to, to kind of step out and whatever, not because it's sexy, not because it's different or I want to win these people. You got to know what God has called you to, man, because it could be hard, right? If you're not ready.
It is, not could be. And I don't think there's actually that much sexy about it. I promise you, you want to.
Well, I mean, there's people who are watching this. They watch what I do. They watch what you're doing. And like, I want to do that.
Right.
Oh, I want to do that. It's like, oh, do you really want to do it type deal? It looks flashy or whatever the case is, but they don't know the scrutiny. They don't know the other stuff. Like I had a dude hit me up the other day and was like, and you know what I'm saying, God bless this dude, but he said, I wish I could be like you and sit at home and talk to beautiful women on podcasts all day. Like that's what I do. Sit at home and talk to beautiful women on podcast. They don't see what, what actually goes into it. They don't see that the majority of the women are old women, like older women, but they're beautiful women too. You know what I'm saying? They just whatever, man. But anyway, it's the fruit of it to kind of know that it's worth it and to know that it's working. I don't flash those messages. You know what I'm saying? I like to talk about them, and if we do start talking about them, we'll start tearing up. You know what I'm saying? Because it's kind of cost a lot. It's the whole term "come and live." The term before that, come and die, to find that you may truly live, man. And you have to die to your desires. And I think it's for everybody who's following Christ and they have a calling or they have a vocation or they want to do something. It costs, man. It really does. And even it looks cool. Like this is the polished up version, like what people are seeing or whatever. They haven't seen the tears, they haven't seen the ridicule, the laughter, the finger pointing, the emails, the all kinds of weird, crazy stuff that we've put up with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No,
they don't get to talk to the old man when you come off stage. And it's like, brother, you need to reconsider what you're doing.
It wasn't even an old man. It was like a teenager, dude. I've had some ridiculous stuff. You have no idea.
Oh my goodness.
But then, we've preached in Muslim countries. We've had our power cut. We've been followed by the secret police. I've had some crazy dude threw a cell phone at my head one time, right in the middle of when I was talking. I mean, we've slept in rough places, had cars break down. It's just, but again, it's so trivial. I read the examples of Paul and I'm going, I was just reading today and he's, led to this town and he's cast a demon out of a girl. Next thing you know, he's beaten and thrown into a prison. I'm like, I got nothing to complain about, but there is a cost. And man, we live in an age of comfort and we don't like cost. We like pleasure, especially, pleasure that's quick and easy, but we don't like cost in or out of the church. But I'm telling you, like you said, when you are willing to give up your life, that's when you find it. And man, I'd rather be challenged than bored. And there's a lot of Christians I know that they got their hell insurance, but they're not living the life they were meant to live. Yeah. And that's because it's going to cost something.
Yeah. You know what? And just recently, my whole dichotomy was changed when it comes to that. I believe that there's things that we all deserve universally for being sons and daughters of God. But as far as like maybe on the cusp of pursuing your dreams or having a happy marriage, having a successful marriage that other people envy, that other people wish they could have, these things like that are successful in your life. I think I was saying for a long time, I think everybody deserves to do what they love for a living. Everybody deserves to have their dreams. But I read a book, and it was just a little excerpt out of the book, and it says that, that stuff's not promised. You have to work for what you believe in. To have a successful marriage, you don't deserve anything. To have a successful marriage, you have to do the work. You have to, have those times of intimacy, of just the conversation. Hey, this is what I'm going, you know what I'm saying? What is your day like? Because you go through the motions and stuff, and that doesn't work out. Like if even like having a successful podcast, having a successful band, you got to show up for practice. Like you got to be on the phone with venues. There's so much. You have to actually learn how to play your instrument. Like it could be just like a pipe dream. you deserve what you earn and what you work for, man. And that when I understood that there's a cost to everything. It's not free. It's not, you don't just get to show up and grab the microphone and start performing or doing the podcast or whatever. There's, blood, sweat, and tears into this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, that's just a human principle. Honestly, I think that nothing of value is done without extraordinary effort and sacrifice. I mean, you look at Olympic athletes and they refrain from eating anything. They work crazy hour, and a lot of them are doing jobs on the side to make it happen. I mean, you want to do something extraordinary. It's called extraordinary for a reason. Yeah. Again, I will say though that what makes Jesus different than sort of your self-help guys out there is that ultimately the foundation of it is, again, as I keep saying, that relationship with Jesus. And I, like I said at the beginning, well, maybe not at the beginning, but I said, I can fall into a trap of ambition becoming an idol. I want to do all this thing and I don't have a problem working hard. But there's almost sometimes a sadder reality getting to the top of the mountain, realizing nothing's there. You know what I mean? Because sometimes it's almost like, at least, you see those bands that are forever trying to make it. And man, that hope can almost keep you going in a weird sort of way. And then you see these people at the top of the game and they're killing themselves. Yeah. And so ultimately it's like you get the first things first, you get your foundation right, man, then Christians should be the most creative, the hardest working, the most disciplined, the most excellent, all of that stuff in the right order. You get that first thing first, and then by all means, be a good steward. Don't waste your life. Yeah.
Well, it's just, trying to balance the two, because we come into many, church circles where the grace thing is free. You didn't do anything to earn it. It's given to you. It's a free gift of grace, of salvation, or whatever the case is. Like, you know what I'm saying? But then it costs you, like, you come into this relationship with Christ and it's free. So it's like, hey, everything's free. I didn't, you don't have to work. We have to cease from dead works. We have to cease from trying to be ambitious or whatever, which there's good things in that stuff. Like, it's not all bad to be a workaholic. I think people who are successful, you have to put in the work. You don't just show up, though. Then that's with your relationship with Christ. That's with your regular job that you have to get up early for, to go to work, to be successful there, and to keep your job. Like, you have to work at what you love and what you want to build and cultivate, right?
Yeah. But again, the salvation side of it is, we have a faith of tensions, apparent paradoxes. I talk about that quite a bit in the book. But grace is free, and yet there's all sorts of talk of like Paul uses all of this military and athletic language to describe beat your body into submission and run the race to win and work out your faith in fear and trembling. And it doesn't, free doesn't mean easy, right? There's still a narrow road after that. And again, like I keep pointing out, look at all the early apostles, disciples, early church fathers, mothers. Look at all of the examples in history. A lot of them suffered and died. So there is a narrow road and there's a difficulty to it. But it's not a value thing or a salvation thing. And of course, we can't opening up the can of worms of where do our choices and God's sovereignty interact. And I don't think we want to go there other than to say, I believe both matter and we have to live in light of both truths. Yeah. And then with all of that, holding that in check, because being productive is great. But like I said, if you're not careful, production becomes your God. And now you find yourselves, I get very frightful of the admonishment in scripture where it says, God, I did this for you. I did that for you. And yet Jesus says, what? Depart from me, I never knew you. Yeah. That's a scary thought. It's a scary thought that, man, if we saw those people and that resume, what would you and I think? We'd think, man, they're killing it. Yeah. Look at all that they're doing. And yet Jesus said it's not a very popular thing to say, very palatable, but he said, get away from me. I don't even know who you are. So you better make knowing Jesus your goal and worry about the doing after that.
We look at like Revelations or whatever, 1 and 2, where it's, we have like the Christian heresy hunters and they're exposing false prophets and making sure everybody's doctrine's on point and stuff like that. But then we look at Revelations 1 and 2 and say, look, you did good exposing those who were false apostles and did good, but I got this one thing against you. You left your first love. And that's what he's like rebuking everyone. It's like you left your, like you were going through the motions, and you left the intimacy of it. And that is scary. It's not fun. And you have to check yourself. You have to cease from the works and bring yourself back and kind of just take that breath and say, okay, like, when's the last time I got into the scriptures? Not to learn, but to really spend like an intimate thing with God, right? And it's like, that's a thing, right? To, what I'm saying, getting into the scriptures to learn and to prove points and to prove people wrong versus like, okay, God, like, teach me again, those type of things. And if it ever gets away from that, man, then it gets into dead works and it's not fun. It gets into religion, empty religion.
Yep. Yeah, you can detach from the vine for a season, but you will eventually wither and die. I mean, that's just the truth. So that's my that's what I pray for myself. That's what I work at is to stay dependent, to stay attached, and then let the fruit speak for itself.
Yeah, that's deep, man. Just understand, like you were saying earlier, like still needing Jesus, still needing the grace of Christ today. As much as you needed it on day one where he found you at, right? Yeah, especially when there's years in between that gap there, and you kind of forget the person that you was, but you go back and you understand, like, man, I still need him today because, I think it's scary, but it should be. There's you could do one thing and kind of blow everything. You can ruin it by doing one thing off. And that's why I think that this walk is delicate, that we need, because people think that you reach a level where you're beyond reproach and I'm good, I'm successful, I'm this, but truth is you could do one thing. We look at the world. I like to talk about Roseanne. You can send out one tweet and destroy everything that you've built your whole life or whatever. And that's the same thing if there's this weird place if we get too comfortable with God or we don't need him like we used to. We're still dependent. It's a weird place to be so spiritually strong, to be able to work miracles, to pray for people and things happen, and you're doing all of this beautiful stuff and there's this authority that you have in Christ. But then again, on the other hand, you're still broken, and I still need him as much as I did day one. It's a weird dichotomy there.
I think if anything, you become more aware. I think God's goodness is so infinite beyond our comprehension that it doesn't grow proportionate to your understanding of God. I think it's inversely proportionate. I think the more you understand God, who God is, despite your progress, you become actually more aware of your dependence. That's certainly been my experience. But again, to go to your point of I don't think that our walk with God is a tightrope at the same time. I do think that God is good. And I think in the same way that from the outside looking in, a marriage looks like it just imploded overnight, but the truth is it didn't. Mm-hmm. It was years in the making. Now, again, are there exceptions to that rule? Sure.
Maybe ministries and stuff too, though. Something that's like out there in the forefront where like, oh, you did that, you're done, type deal.
Right.
You have to be careful because
many times that was the culminating event of years of compromise. Going
outside the marriage, it could be just being weak, man, putting yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time and not walking away. You know what I'm saying? Marriages and I've been in this thing a long time, man. I've seen so many ministers fall through sexual perversion and sexual, immorality. Some woman came up who is hotter than their wife. Their wife has had a couple kids and they've been with them 20 years. And there's another young lady in the church, and they fall for it. They trade the wife in. And
well, you look at David, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but again, what was sort of the key principle there? I mean, he was supposed to be at the battle, right? It said it in the summertime when kings are normally at war, he was chilling in the palace.
Yeah.
Right. And what does that say? Well, he thought that he had earned it. It was done. He didn't have to continue to be in that place of dependence and with his brothers, accountability. He didn't need to be doing. He kind of thought, nah, I'm cool. I've done this. I've done this now 12 years. Yeah. I know you've done it for a while. I've been around people that have for a while. you're never done. There's no retirement in Jesus. And you need to keep dependent and keep reliant. And the second you think, nah, I'm cool, I'll skip this battle. That's when Bathsheba, decides, like, I don't know what she's doing on the rooftop. I mean, maybe that was a cultural thing, but it seemed a little bit cruel. But either way, that's when that happens, right? That's when you're doing, and he was looking too. He knew what was happening on the rooftops.
That's
right?
the thing, man. Whenever you're dealing with, sexual sin or sexual perversion, and we look at, Paul, he tells you all these different keys and ways to overcome this and beat that and overcome this. But when it comes to sexual immorality, he says, flee youthful lust, run from it. Don't even entertain it. Because man, it's sad, bro. But, and I'm not saying I'm saying your salvation. I don't think you lose your salvation because you there's people who preach that. I've sat under that kind of teaching. Or if you do something like that, then if you die, you're going to hell type deal or whatever. But I think it's if it's worth something to you, fight for it. If it's worth something to you, protect it. And I think that our faith is that, that the fact that we know God as a father, and not let anybody take that from you or let anybody coax you out of that or change your mind or what you believe or what you can and cannot do. There is liberty there, right? But at the same time, there's freedom that we're talking about, but there's these core principles and core things that if you get away from, not that somebody's gonna, somebody's gonna put you out of the church, but you will mess yourself up if you go outside of these principles, right?
Right. And then again, that comes back to what I was saying before, which is to follow God and his design is not some arbitrary, he's not just some mean dictator who says, follow these rules. They don't mean anything, but I want you to, and I'm in charge. Yeah. It's for your good. Yeah. It's for your good. You're playing with fire. And like you said, it's like, man, it might look good, but it is, it is a moment of pleasure and a lifetime of regret. And God put things in place for a reason. And it's not just an arbitrary divine rule. It's also for your greatest joy and good. And to follow him is freedom. And I often talk when I talk to people after shows, I say, look, the world tells me you guys are free, right? The world tells me that to do whatever you want is freedom. I don't see a lot of free people out there. I see people that are being destroyed by their ideas of sexuality, by their ideas of money and materialism. I see people being destroyed. And I almost never have a non-believing person disagree with me. Almost never. Almost always do they say, yeah, you're right. We're being like, this stuff ain't working. It's not working for us. We demand our freedom, but we recognize it's not working for us. And that's the sad lie that people live under.
Ben, who's the book for, man? Is it for Christians wanting to share their faith and kind of get out there, or is it?
The book, well, a couple things. First of all, unfortunately, the book won't be out for a little while, so the timing of this is funny. But hey, I've appreciated the conversation either way. It's Jesus in the Secular World, Reaching a Culture in Crisis. The heart of it is for anyone, honestly. It doesn't matter if you're 60 or just a kid in high school. I want to use my life to reach those outside of the church. I see this growing divide between secular culture and the church bubble. I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be like Jesus in the world, not of the world, but relevantly sharing who he is. And it's basically just my life illustrating these principles that I've learned about seeking God, about having a broken heart, about learning to speak the right language, about having the courage to act. And so that's the basic idea behind the book. It's for anyone. It will be eventually, like I said, about mid-November is when it comes out. It'll be anywhere that books are sold. But there are some other ways that you can engage with this kind of material. We also have a podcast, part of Come&Live, called Provoke and Inspire. It's similar to probably what you're doing, similar to what we've been talking about. How do you live radically for Jesus outside of the church? It's four of us. It's Chad Johnson, former A&R guy for Tooth and Nail, myself, my dad, David Pierce, who's been doing radical missions for 30 years, and then our European director, Luke Greenwood. He's from the UK, so he sounds really smart because he has a British accent. But it's, Provoke and Inspire, similar to you. It's iTunes, everywhere else. Otherwise, steiger.org, STEIGER /JSW. that is how you can, I'm just actually looking that up to make sure, but that's how you can find out more about the book as it's kind of getting closer to being done.
Have you heard the excuse not to evangelize outside of the church is that there's lost people in the church too, like they need Jesus in the church?
I think everyone needs Jesus. I think there are lost people. There are plenty of lost people who come to church. I think it's a calling thing. It's not, you know what I mean? It's like, these aren't supposed to be in contradiction. It's like, we're all different members of the same body. Mm-hmm. Some of us are going to be called in the church, some of us out of it. So it's a calling thing to me.
Yeah, there was like I came out of the gospel rap scene and stuff, and there was always like those guys. I was like, you know what I'm saying? Eventually it was like, okay, if you guys want to win the lost, like you got to go where lost people are. Like you got to go downtown. We got to go to the club scene. You can perform in the clubs, and we did that, and we were scrutinized. Oh, what? You ain't got no business down there, blah, blah, blah. You know, all this kind of stuff. We've preached, we've done worship songs in bars and all that kind of stuff, you know. And, you know, and there was always those people that say, you know, there's the lost people in church, so we're just going to stay in church. But I found out like a lot of times, and this was just me being open, authentic with what I was going through at the time, was like people just want to, you know, the applause of men is intoxicating, right? So therefore, you don't want to go where you're not wanted. It's comfortable to stay. Man, it just changed so much from doing like the gospel scene where we could just somebody would bring us out to their church and there's 500 kids there, versus we're going to go to the clubs and we got to hand out flyers and try to get a crowd and there's 30 people. You know what I'm saying? And so we had to do that, and it was just a big difference there, man. But we've heard that a lot, that there's, you know, lost people in the church who that's who we need to win.
Yeah. Well, again, it's about your heart and about your motivation, and do what God's called you to do.
I guess somebody's got to win them, because I guess they're not lying. You know what I'm saying? They're not,
yeah.
But I think it changed with like versus like you're just an entertainer for the youth group kids. Like we need somebody to entertain them for the pizza party and stuff.
Right. That only goes. That's only fun for so long.
Yeah, man. Hey, bro, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I really enjoyed this conversation, and
me too.
Look forward to speaking with you again, man. Thank you so much, and keep up the good work, brother.
Yeah, no problem. Again, if the book unfortunately won't be out for a while, otherwise, Provoke and Inspires our podcast. Thanks for having us on. And is that a unicorn you got in the back there?
Up there?
Other side.
Oh, yeah, it's my wife's my little pony from like the 80s.
My Little Pony.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just had to check.
Just found it the other day. Yeah, we got a bunch of crazy things. That's why I was going to ask, because you were saying that you guys use symbols, and I'm like, I got a lot of symbols in my room. I got a lot of symbols tattooed on me and things like that. I like symbols too. I like redeeming symbols, redeeming the rainbow, you know what I'm saying? Redeeming the triangle, like all kinds of things like that. You're not talking about those kind of symbols though, right? You're meaning more of like the allegory or the archetype of the stories, symbols like that.
Just how to communicate the truth of Jesus, not using sheep and fishing, because unless you're in rural country, most people don't run around with sheep. So, you know, it's just that basic stuff. But maybe we could have the symbol conversation on the next time.
Oh yeah. Are you familiar with the hero's journey?
I'm not.
Joseph Campbell. Look that up on your own. But that's about the archetype of playing out the role of Jesus in movies, in books, and all of these other places as well. Star Wars, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that we've seen, the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So
sweet.
Check it out, man. The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell.
Will do.
All right, Ben. Take it easy, brother.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, peace. Ben Campbell from Come&Live. Really cool guy, man. Been a fan of their work for a while. Seeing those videos that they put together for Maddie Montgomery, from the band For Today, Sleeping Giant, Brian Head Welch. A lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool evangelism stuff, and then some really cool practical stuff. Like I said, about being a father. There's a really good video they did about, you know, being a father, by Maddie Montgomery, who's a really cool guy. Ran into him a couple weeks ago at a concert as well. So yeah, good stuff, man. Shout out to everybody holding us down in the chat right now. Holding us down in the chat live on YouTube. Christy Folks. It's like Brent and Kelly. It's the names I see right now. Let's see. Christy says good ones. She says, Philippians 2:12 and 13, do everything without murmuring and disputing. All things are done for God's good pleasure. Amen. Yeah, there's a place I like the fact that he talked about the urgency that Paul had, right? This urgency to get the gospel out, the urgency to let people know, and they were like forsaking marriage, they were forsaking all types of stuff because it was urgent to get out there. And then when you understand that urgency that these guys had, and then we look at some of the preterist stuff like we've had on with Brian Godawa, that they knew the end was coming. Like they knew. Supposedly it's been 2,000 years since those guys were here, right? 2,000 years ago. But they talked about this urgency that the end was nigh. And then Jesus comes up and says, you guys standing here, this generation shall not pass away until all of these things be fulfilled. But we look at this urgency. It's like, look, you got to do this. It's going to happen. It's coming soon. Not 2,000 years later, not 3,000 years later, whatever people think it's going to be, but just then for those people. Anyway, my view of the scriptures changed when I understood that urgency there that Paul was having. And then a lot of it started to make more sense while Jesus was giving instruction. And so Christians would read that and say, well, that's for us. Man, that was 2,000 years ago. He's giving you instruction on like what to do on the day of wrath or the day of judgment or whatever. No, he was giving those people their instruction. Some of the other stuff, the teachings of Christ, those are universal. Those are timeless. Those will never pass away. That'll be forever. To do good unto others, to bring forth fruits of good deeds and labor and things like that. Like that stuff is universal. It will never pass away. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I wanted to change it up a little bit as well. We been having a lot of similar episodes lately. A lot of new age stuff. A lot of people talking about ghosts and contacting the dead and stuff like that. A lot of psychics and stuff. So energy work. I like to change it up every now and then. You know what I'm saying? I can get into all of it. I got something to say about a little bit of all of it. So, it was a good interview, and I love his heart for the gospel and to share with the lost, and got to have, I don't talk to a lot of church people too much anymore. So it was a good chance for me to roll some of these ideas and some of the stuff I've been seeing that go on within the church realm, and about evangelism and who's doing it right and who's doing it wrong. And this is the way that you should evangelize, and this is the way that you shouldn't. Like he was talking about, like people downing them for rock. And I'm telling you, it's so funny. And my excuse is that we are in the Bible Belt, man. There's some crazy churches down here, crazy theologies. I've seen it all. I've had the conversations. My friends have had it. They've been backed into corners and weird little small hole in the wall churches. Man, I should have told this guy this story too, but maybe he's listening to this. Maybe he'll go back and listen to this story. And I feel like I've shared this story on the podcast before, but I'm going to share it again because it fits. We're talking about these little backwood churches. We're talking about Christian rock or Christian metal, Christian rap, right? There's all of these people who say that God cannot use it, or that it's sacrilege and that it's demonic, that rap music's demonic, even the very beat. There's certain drums, there's certain churches around here that won't let you have drums because they believe that the drums conjure up demonic entities and put you in a trance-like state, which it kind of does. But like you were saying, go back to the scriptures. It says to praise him with all of these loud clanging cymbals, praise him with the timbrel, the high end and the low end. So you have the sheepskin pulled over the tambourine with the shells and things on it that kind of make those high ends and low ends of the timbrel. And so using these instruments to praise God with, it very much is a biblical thing. I would say a buddy of mine, my brother-in-law, went to a revival. And if you guys have already heard the story, you're going to hear it again. He went to a revival with a friend of his at his church, a little backwoods Baptist church. I don't know if it was Baptist. Maybe it was full gospel. Maybe it was Southern. I don't even know the difference between all these guys anymore. They all just kind of run together. But it was a backwoods church. He goes to the church. He's a Christian, mind you. He loves Jesus, got a relationship with Christ. He goes there, and he's wearing a Christian band t-shirt. The Christian band happened to be the band Demon Hunter. Really good Christian band. Love those guys. Their symbol that they use is a skull, a demon skull, with a bullet hole in the forehead. So it's got these big horns, and it looks like kind of like a cow skull, but it's a demon skull with a bullet in the forehead. So meaning that we're demon hunters. We kill demons, and I've actually got Demon Hunter on my arm and Kenji Oriental for those watching on the stream. Everybody wants me to break down my tattoos, but anyway, it just happened to fit. So I have Demon Hunter and Kenji Oriental. He goes to the church. He's wearing the Demon Hunter shirt. The pastor calls him up. He says, "Son, what's on that shirt you have?" And I'm gonna go back and forth. I'm gonna use my brother Wayne voice just because it's been a while. "Son, how you doing? Who told you to wear that shirt in this church? The audacity." And he says, "No, it's a Christian band." "No, son, somebody lied to you. That's not a Christian band. It's worldly." "No, sir. Demon Hunter is a Christian band, and this is the symbol." And anyway, he tried to tell him what the shirt meant. He wasn't having it. The pastor made my friend take his shirt off in the church. Took his shirt off. He's standing there without his shirt on, and said, "We're gonna pray for you. You've been lied to. It's demonic, and the audacity of you to bring that in the house of God." There's the house of God, right? What is the house of God? It's definitely not a church building. So they start praying for him. They put him on the ground. They start pouring anointing oil in his mouth, trying to cast out demons because he had a Christian rock t-shirt on with that was called Demon Hunter. And needless to say, maybe it is needless to say, but he's still a Christian. He's still a believer, still goes to church every Sunday. That's wild. Because I could just imagine it. Like, I wasn't there, but I've been in similar places. Like, you can imagine people praying in the Holy Ghost. People shaking. Yada key, yada key. They're praying over him. They're really getting into it. And he's just like, "Hey, it's Christian. I'm a Christian." "No, you ain't no Christian, son. You're a child of the devil. We go cast him out of you in God's name right now. Fire on you. Put fire on him, Lord." I'm telling you, I've been to these churches. This is what they do. It's crazy. I'm in the Bible Belt. It's some crazy stuff going on down here, man. Crazy stuff. These people are insane, man. They really are. They're delusional. They are delusional. I've been to some crazy churches. It's crazy. In the land of the Bible Belt. We are under the reverend spell in the land of the Bible Belt, Alabama. But I think I've been talking about this too, that I think if I can thrive with my message in the Bible Belt, if I can thrive and be in amidst the ridicule, that stuff really happened. Like, it's deep. But if you can stand strong amidst that and not give up, there's a blessing in it for you. I'm saying this again. I said it on another podcast the other day, but I'm going to say it again because somebody wrote me and said that they needed to hear that. Don't grow weary in well-doing. Keep the faith. Don't look for, we're looking for other people to affirm our beliefs and affirm our experiences. For me, the Bible affirmed the majority of those crazy experiences that I've had. And so that's, with, spirits and ghosts and all kind, and just really tearing the Bible apart and finding out all of the crazy obscure stuff that's in there that people would never even know that's in the Bible. The Bible is a very interesting book. It's a magical book as well. To know that, like, if God be for you, who can be against you? No matter what you've gone through, no matter what you've been through, to know that God has your back. Like, there's a release, there's a spiritual encounter when people come to that understanding for the first time. Where were you at when he found you? remember that place. Where were you at? Needle hanging out your arm. I know people has been there. In a drunken stupor, laying in your own urine and throw up from a long night of partying. I know people have done that. Where were you when he found you? Where were you when you came into that revelation of Christ and that God's love for you is unquenchable? The overwhelming, radical love of God. It's there. If you haven't felt it, it's there for you to experience, no matter where you are, no matter who you are. God is not a respecter of person. You haven't gone too far out there. God has not given up on you. God has not turned his back on you. He said he'd never leave you and he'd never forsake you. Never means never. He'll never do that. We try to judge God off of our parents or our pastors or our leaders. We think that relationship models somehow because it's some type of authority figure. That's not it. Just because your parents have given up on you, just because your pastor's given up on you, because your spouse or your husband, your friends give up on you, God will never give up on you. And that's enough to get through anything, to deal with anything. The anything is different for everybody, man. And I'm just glad that it's universal. These principles are universal. I can share my story and you relate on some level. We can have a guest on, they share their story. We relate on some level. Some level? A piece of it? Maybe? No? Yeah? Hopefully you can pull something away from it. I really do believe that there's things that you can pull away from each and every one of these stories. The authenticity of being who you are and who God created you to be. We're not supposed to be lemmings. You're not supposed to look like, you're not supposed to be it's so weird. You're not supposed to be little copycats, doppelgangers of other pastors and preachers, and supposed to be influenced by Christ and go out and full of the Holy Spirit and be who God's called you to be. Whatever that looks like. That's the big thing. Whatever that looks like. What does that look like? Man. We want to define it, right? We want to say, okay, this is what it is and this is what I am. I'm an evangelist. I do this. I'm a child of God. You don't even know. But you do know that there's fruit there. You do know that you're being effective, and you do know that there's a sense of peace when you do it or when you go there. I say go where the peace is. It could be hard. It could be trying. But go to where the peace is. Why would you go anywhere else? Because when the peace is not there, God's not calling you there. Go to where his presence is. His presence will go before you. Wherever that is. And it's different for everybody. We're talking about how, I mentioned that, ministry or this podcast or what he's doing looks sexy. It does look sexy. Dude's, performing for 19,000 people, touring the world. It's pretty sexy, man. That sounds fun, right? Performer for that many people. So there's people who envy that. They want to do that. That is something to ascribe to. But it's if God hasn't led you to that, then it's not for you. And whatever it looks like, you have to follow the hand of God and the power of God to it. People look at what I'm doing. Trust me, and I'm saying this from experience. I have friends who say, hey, I want to start reaching out to the New Agers. I want to start reaching out to the New Agers, to the psychics. Trust me. They don't do it usually, but they say they have a great idea. We have those friends who have all these ideas, but they don't execute. TruthSeekah, I'm going to start reaching out to the New Agers and the spiritual community, man. I really feel like God just has a heart for those people. Hey, I got the platform to do it, man. We reach a lot of different people here. The demographic is pretty open, man. And there's a common thread with all of them. I think, I think the New Age term is a Christian term. Jesus said, I'll be with you, to the end of the age. Talked about the New Age coming in, ushering in the New Age, which is age of Aquarius, really. I want to witness to the New Agers, man. Christy's laughing. We got a psychic right now. She's listening right now. She says, ha ha, to the psychics. I mean, trust me. I want to witness to the New Agers and to the psychics. Then you trying to witness to the New Agers and the psychics, and then you find out that the psychics and the New Agers are closer to Jesus than you were. Mind blown. You find out that the Hindus are carriers of the love of God. The Hindus are carriers of peace and righteousness and joy and love. You find out that the Hindus are closer to the heartbeat of God and closer to Jesus than the Christians. Blows up your whole realm of thinking. You got it all figured out. Oh, wait. They can't. Okay, you're into some things that God is against. God is not in there. Man, look. Until you're able to see God in all, you can't see God at all. There's nowhere you can go, no place you can go that God is not there. In the book of Acts, it talks about if God will deal with any man, any woman, as long as they will repent. As long as you turn from your wickedness, and the Bible gives a good description of wickedness and things like that, hurting people, manipulating people, judging, backbiting, slander, all of these type of things. And so those are laws, man. If you entertain that kind of stuff, you're going to get that kind of stuff spiritually, and then you're going to welcome that stuff in your life. But if you turn from that, you'll be put on the highway to holiness. Repent, turn from your wickedness. I know that word is an old fashioned. We don't like that word or whatever, but it's to have a redirection, to do a 180, to turn around, to have a new way of thinking. A new way of thinking. On which level? That God hates you? That God is this? That God is that? Yeah. A new revelation of who God is. To represent Jesus. To represent Jesus. What? To represent him. Represent Jesus. Because he's been presented wrongly. I really believe that. That's all we can do. We can only go off of our revelation. We can only give what has been given to us. That grace that we've been shown by God through Christ. That grace that's yours, that is yours. Perfect peace that no man can give you and no man can take away. You can offer that same peace, that same grace that God has so beautifully shown you. That's all I can give you. I can't give you anything else. All the rest of it's just theory. Rules, regulations, and doctrines. It's theory. I don't know. But I can only give you what I know, what I understand, what I've experienced, what is mine. And the deeper that you grow in God, the more you have to offer. The more that you have to give, the more that you can truly be like the Apostle Paul when he says, I have become all things to all men so that I can win some. That's deep. That's deep. What religion are you? What are you? Of all things, what are you? What are you going through? What's happening? Let's talk. Yeah, I'm saying this isn't falling upon deaf ears. This is for somebody. And it's deep, man. When you really, I know we've heard this, but when you really understand it, when you understand it, when you overstand it, when you know it, nobody can take it from you. And you really, the Bible comes to life because you can see it played out in your life. Oh, that's what he meant. Yeah. Righteousness. That's what it's about, man. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed that conversation. Like I said, switching it up a little bit. Been doing a lot of mystical, a lot of, energy work and healing, and some of it's just kind of running together. I've even thought about maybe doing a month or a week or something where I just don't have any guests. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's the information overload. You know what I'm saying? So I really have just go a month or something. Just try it. See what happens. Or just go solo shows. See what happens. Because some of it, we've discussed all of it already. I know we're getting close to 150 episodes, probably over that, but yeah, part of it. So anyway, just some news right quick, and I've been talking about it, but September the 22nd, I'm going to be in Tallahassee, Florida, and hey, Christy Lee's speaking. She's in the chat. She says, great idea. Bring Aaron on with you. Yeah, me and Aaron can do some stuff together. That'd be awesome. My wife. Everybody's been commenting about that last show we did. I'm going to be in Tallahassee, Florida, September the 22nd. It's going to be an all-day festival. It's called Shanti Fest. The information is on my website. I'm going to be doing a set there. I'm going to be performing, and I'm also going to be doing a live podcast. This is going to be the first one I've ever done where we kind of do a podcast in front of an audience. And so hopefully that'll go good. Hopefully that'll be the start of something new, the start of something big where I can actually get out there and start traveling and doing some hosting live podcasts in different places. The show is growing exponentially. I don't even know how to, I'm pretty sure I just butchered exponentially. I don't even know how to say that word, but it's growing like crazy. That's how I got to put it. It's growing like crazy. The numbers are increasing. A lot of people are jumping on board with what we're doing here, and it kind of opens up doors to kind of start getting out there. There's been a lot of talk about Patreon meetups. There's been a lot of talks about Discord family hangout meetups and stuff like that. So all of that stuff is coming to light. We're definitely going to be moving forward. This is growing. This is building. It's living. It's breathing. It's a family. It's an organism and not an organization. This is what we are, man. I'm excited about the future. Also, to let you guys know that Christy Lee will be going with us on the show as well on the 22nd. She'll be doing I think she'll be doing guided meditation and healing there. So that'll be beautiful. She's on the bill with me when we talked about doing some stuff together years ago. And now it's coming to pass. It's coming to fruition. This is our first live event together. We've done stuff in homes. We've done stuff in private settings, but this is going to be our first event that we're able to kind of go out there and do together. So that's going to be fun. Also, we have an event coming up as of now, November the 2nd. We're going to be at Deb's house over in Mobile, Alabama. That's where we did my album release party, which was really fun. They have an awesome house/cabin deal that's big enough to host a concert. So we'll be doing that on November the 2nd. All that info is on my website, TruthSeekah.com. You get check out all that stuff there. I hope to see you guys out. We've been having a lot of people drive out from like far away when we do concerts, and just let me know that it's touching people like what we're doing, so it's working. So we're going to start getting out there a lot more, doing more concerts, more podcasts and stuff like that, out there traveling, and I'm excited about the future. Again, if you want to support my work and enable me to go out there and do that at any level of giving, even if it's $1, you get access to so much stuff. Head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to all the stuff I talked about. You get all my music, 10 plus albums. There's a bunch of new music there now as well. Like I think I got 3 songs off of this upcoming EP that I'm doing that are done, and they're on Patreon. You can get them before anyone else. They won't be out until several months, but if you're a patron supporter, that music is free to download right now. It comes out as I finish each track. You just get access to download it. Bunch of other cool stuff. Thursday Night School of the Mystics, all that cool stuff. So patreon.com/TruthSeekah. Thank you guys for the support and all the new people who are jumping on board with this, man. Welcome to the fold. You guys are awesome. There really is community there. Join our Discord. join our hangouts, all that good stuff. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. We're going to do it again very soon. Love y'all. Peace, peace.
Your way is so much higher than mine, so much higher than mine, so much deeper than mine, so much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah Podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.